Welcome to the Art of Being Human. Last week I talked to you about what happens when you believe false things about yourself because of the abuse that you have suffered. Today I want to go into more about guilt, false guilt, true guilt, shame, and the things that go on with that. And then we may have time even after that to go into some other things, but it's still related to the self-concept field. When you are being abused by somebody, I said last week that you internalize that. You start to believe that is true about yourself. And it is true that a lot of people suffer a lot of guilt. Well, how much of that guilt should they suffer from, and what can they do about it? I'm going to tell you that there are two kinds of guilt. There's true guilt and there's false guilt. True guilt is when you've actually done something wrong. And I have a little chart here. You've stolen something, you have spread falsehood about somebody, you've lied about somebody and told people things about them that are not true. You've lied in the sense of you're blaming somebody and telling them, oh, kids do it all the time. He ate the cookies. He broke the vase. It wasn't me, you know. They shift the blame onto other people rather than themselves. Lying about your accomplishments. What we find with people who send in resumes for jobs, they will lie about what they've accomplished. Some of them will even lie about what schools they went to because they want the job, and so they go ahead and they send in a resume that's filled with falsehoods. I had a lady wanted to join my staff when I had my own counseling center. And she wrote me a letter, and she didn't even check to see what my name was. She said, "Dear Sir or Madam." Now, I was the director of the counseling center. I was the chief board member. I was the director. I was the owner of the business. I was the one who did most of the counseling. It was just a very small business that I had in conjunction with another counseling center that I was connected with. She never even bothered to check who I was. And so she sent me this Sir or Madam letter, which tended me, that kind of throws me off. That's worth nothing. I wouldn't even keep the letter. I just tossed it out. But she said, I can do anything you want. I can do your secretarial work. I can answer your phones. I can do your intakes. I can do your counseling. I can do everything you want. Everything you need to be done, I can do it. And I didn't see any education, any college that she graduated from that would give her the right to call herself a counselor. Now, in this state, you have to have at least a master's degree. Most of us have more than that. And it has to be from an accredited college. It has to be in a counseling program or a related field that you can use for counseling, such as social work or something like that. And you have to pass state exams. You have to be board certified by the state. I had all of these things. She had practically nothing. Practically nothing. And she's saying on her resume, give me a call. I can be there anytime. I'll do all your work for you. But most of the times when we get resumes from people, I graduated from William and Mary College. I graduated from certain college, or I went and I did an internship overseas in a special student exchange programs. And you go and you check that and you find they didn't have any of that. There are some people who have actually been on staff in a college, and when they check it, when they finally get around to checking it, because maybe they don't right away, they find out that they've lied about all of their accomplishments. Their accomplishments didn't happen, or they've stretched the truth so much that it appears like they've done a lot more than what they've done. So lying about somebody, placing blame on somebody, stretching the truth, things like that are things you can feel guilty about. And sometimes you need to apologize. Maybe a simple apology is enough. Sometimes you might have to correct the situation. Sometimes you need to make restitution. But those things constitute real guilt. Doing something that you know very well that you shouldn't have done, but you did it anyway for your own benefit. Now, guilt is something that's hard to live with because you feel terrible about yourself. And in that situation, that brings you to a repentance. That brings you to a place where you can make things right. And when you make things right, the guilt leaves, because even though it's not perfect, at least you did something to try to rectify a bad situation. All of this is true guilt. But when you get to false guilt, that is something else. False guilt is when you believe things about yourself that just are not true. For example, you feel guilty because of the abuse that you suffered. See, what we are dealing with is the abuse issue. You feel guilty because you were abused, and you felt guilty. What about? One, you weren't worthy, and that's why you were abused, and that becomes a self-concept issue. I'm not worth anything. I was abused because I was punished and so forth, and I deserved it. Or you feel guilty because you did not stop the abuse. You feel guilty due to whatever has happened to you, and you start thinking, I deserved the abuse. I was awful. I was not good enough. And my guilt is that I didn't stop it. Supposing you're a child, supposing you're a female child and you're a young teenager or even younger than that, and you had somebody in the family rape you, and you feel guilty over the rape. Why should you feel guilty over that? I should have stopped it. No, you couldn't stop it. One thing you have to realize in terms of abuse, there is no equal power base between a person who is the abuser and the person who's abused. The power base is not there. You could not stop something that somebody did to you if they were too intimidating, too large, too strong, too powerful, too threatening. You would not have had the personal resources to fight it and say, stop it, I'm calling the police. Stop it, or I'm going to take legal action against you. You don't expect a 9-year-old to be able to say that. They don't even understand that. They're not old enough, but they know something horrendous is happening to them. They know something is wrong. And what makes it even more difficult is that the abuser now gives his reasons for the abuse. And the reasons can be many, and they're all false reasons. I did it because I love you. I did it because I have feelings for you. I did it because you need to learn how to do it, because someday you're going to be married and you'll need to learn how. I'm teaching you how. I did it because you need it. Falsehood right there. You know, or various reasons. This is something special between us. Don't tell anybody else. It's our own secret, wonderful thing. Well, it isn't wonderful. It's horrendous. It's hurtful. It's awful. But you start to make a child believe that it is in their best interest that they were abused. You know, or it's punishment because you didn't do things right and you deserve to be punished. And why do you get punished, supposing you're being hit or kicked? It's to make you a better person. That's why I abuse you, only they wouldn't call it abuse. An abuser will not say, I'm abusing you. An abuser will say, I'm teaching you, I'm showing you things, I love you and this is special between us, or I'm disciplining you. I'm disciplining you so you will become a better person. None of these things are true. But what is a child going to believe? They're going to believe that they could not stop the abuse and they're at fault for it. You are never at fault for it. So for the children that I have many times counseled who have been abused, and I get to pick up the pieces, and I'm glad I get to pick up the pieces. Not that I'm happy for the abuse, but at least I can pick up the pieces and help somebody, and that's a blessing in itself. That's what I'm called to do. But what you have to realize is that if you're being abused, it is never your fault. And I will spend time with children or with adults who have been abused, who are still suffering, because the result of the abuse is going to last for years and years if it's not treated. If the person can't get out of it, can't get out of the trap of it, then they will suffer for it from years throughout adulthood. So I'm sitting in front of a person who's either a child, a young adult, usually female, sometimes male, but it's usually female, and they have all the symptoms of abuse and they can't seem to get past it. I always have to tell them, and I will say, I will tell you this every day for the rest of your life if you need it. As long as I'm here, as long as I live as long as you do. You are not to blame if somebody abuses you. It is not your fault. There's nothing that you could have done that asked for it. There's nothing that you could have done to have stopped it. It absolutely is not your fault. Never blame yourself. You are never to blame. Why? Because somebody took advantage of you. Somebody saw a way to take advantage of you and either blame it on yourself or give what they think is a justifiable reason so that you don't fight back. It's interesting, I saw on television a special show in which perpetrators of abuse were interviewed. They had them in a group situation, and they were all men, and they were abusing children, particularly little girls, and they were all talking about the abuse and why they did it. It was a very interesting show. And they would say things like, when I did it, they had to admit to abuse. They had to admit that they were perpetrators or they couldn't be on the show. And they would admit, yes, I abused this child. Yes, I did these things. I tried to make it so that they thought it was special for them, that it was good for them, that I truly cared for them. And you know, the sad thing is, many of these men really do love children, and many of these men really do care for young people, but they have this addiction, a sexual addiction, and they can't seem to get past it. They can't seem to stop it. And so they try to make it so that when they are abusing a child, the child views this as not a horrible, horrible thing, but that it's something special, there's something good about it, and that only serves to really confuse a child because they can sense there's something wrong. They don't want this abuse. They can sense there's something wrong. But the perpetrator is saying, it's okay, you're wonderful, that's why I'm doing it to you. And I'm wonderful, and I'm teaching you how to do it. You know, it's twisting morality all the way around. It doesn't make any sense at all if you look at it logically, but nothing about abuse seems logical. So they listen to this stuff that their abuser is telling them. You're all right, you'll be all right, don't tell anybody. I can't let you tell anybody. This is something special between you and me. And that's an awful thing. It's an awful thing to abuse a child. But then you get all of these symptoms that people develop as a result of the abuse. I'm not good. I have nothing good in me. So they start to feel false guilt. The false guilt is they feel guilty because they did not stop it. What they have to realize is that they could not stop it. There is nothing you can do to stop abuse if the person is older, has more knowledge, has more strength. There's no equal power base. So you have to realize this is false guilt. It is nothing to feel guilty about. You were taken advantage of. That's not your fault. Your abuser was older and stronger. That's not your fault. Your abuser made it appear normal. You didn't feel it was normal, but the abuser made it appear so, and because they did that, you started to think it must be okay. That's not your fault. You cannot expect a child to have adult resources to handle abuse. It's just not there. They're not old enough. Their brains haven't developed. You got to remember, children's brains develop. They're not like little adults. They can't think like little adults. They think like children. The brain develops over a period of time. When they get to be teenagers, preteen actually, the brain starts to rewire itself. It goes through the same process of wiring and rewiring as it went through when the baby was young, and gradually those brain cells came into use a little bit at a time. Why does a baby not walk when they're first born? It's because when they're first born, their brains aren't developed enough. Their nervous systems and their muscles aren't developed enough. You see horses born, or cattle, or dogs, or cats, they sometimes can get up on their feet within hours and start walking around. The human baby, the development of the brain cells is much slower, and they absolutely are helpless. And when they get older, they have more brain cells. Do not expect a child to be able to think like an adult. They just can't do it. And when they get to be 11 or so, that brain goes through the whole process of rewiring over again. And that is not completed until the mid-20s. I'm going to say 24, 25, around there. And the part of the brain that's rewiring and takes a long time to rewire will be the frontal cortex of the brain. This is where you have your thinking ability, emotions, thinking, decision-making. We wonder why sometimes teenagers make poor decisions. You think, well, at this age, they should know better. If the brain is rewiring, it is not functioning in full capacity. It cannot function as a normal human brain while it is rewiring. It's like under construction. If it's under construction, it's not working right. It's not working like a normal developed brain does. So you can't expect children and teenagers to be able to fight against something that they do not have the mental capacity to fight against, because their brain has not developed to the point where they're able to do it. Now, I know some children develop earlier than others, but you always have to look at abuse and look at everything else in terms of the mental capacity of the child, where they are in their development. And if they're not there in their development to be able to say, don't do this, I'll call the police, they can't do it. And you have to help a child realize it's not their fault. So I've seen children 9, 10, 11 years old that have been abused, and I tell them constantly, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. You're a good kid. Somebody took advantage of you that shouldn't have done so. That's not your fault. You're not an adult. You're not expected to be an adult. If you're an adult, you still aren't expected to be able to fight against something that's bigger and stronger and more powerful than you are. No one can do it. So in terms of this, you don't have to feel guilty over things. Abuse is never your fault. There's no equal power base between an adult and a child. So, and remember also, especially in terms of sexual abuse, this is not a crime of passion. This is a crime of power and control. What the abuser wants from a person is not just to have a sexual relationship with them because they love them. What they want is power and control. Anybody who is abusing you is searching for power and control. That's a part of their psychodynamic. That has nothing to do with you personally, except for the fact that you're the one being taken advantage of. So you have to remember that. Then we get to shame. We have true guilt, which I mentioned first. We have false guilt, which is believing that you're at fault for abuse and you never are. Then you have shame. The shame is even worse. The shame is feeling that you are worth nothing, feeling that you don't have any worth. Why? Because the worth isn't there, and you've been told in so many words, in so many actions, in so many ways that you are not a valuable person, so you start to feel shame. Shame means I couldn't stop it, and because I couldn't stop it, I was not strong enough. I am not a worthy person. I do not have any self-worth. I do not have any worth at all. There is a worthlessness, a sense of worthlessness that goes along with shame that you don't get just from guilt itself. Guilt is bad enough. You're blaming yourself for things that aren't your fault, but it may lead into shame. The fact that I feel guilty that I couldn't do anything about a bad situation means that I am also worthless. I don't have any worth. So it's easy to understand logically, if you look at it this way, why a person would sabotage themselves when something good is about to happen to them, or they fear that nothing good will happen to them because they're not worth anything. And the worst part of it is that if you don't understand the psychodynamics, you accept that as fact. Your reality is, I'm not worth anything. I'm not good. And so therefore, what good can happen to me? Why should anybody be good to me? Why should anybody give me advantages? Why should anybody spend money on me? Because I really am worthless. There's nothing to me that's good. Because I know there's nothing to me, because look what happened to me and I didn't stop it. It's my fault. So you start accepting guilt, you start accepting blame, and it's not legitimate. It is never legitimate. You do not need to accept blame if you're ever abused. It's not your fault. And try not to let it eke into, therefore I have no self-worth, because if I had self-worth, I would have been able to have fought it. I would have been able to have put a stop to it. And it just doesn't happen that way. So the person who has not been abused will say, well, you just tell them, don't do this. I'll run away. I'll call the police. I'll do this. I'll do that. But the person who's being abused cannot do this because they don't have the strength to do it, because they're being overpowered by somebody who's manipulative and somebody who knows just how to press their buttons to get them to do what they want them to do and to make them feel that it's probably okay. Now I'm going to stop here because I do have a lot more to talk about it. We'll save it for next time. The symptoms that you get, I gave a list of them to you. We'll go over them next time, and I'm going to start discussing them one by one, and you'll see how bad abuse is. You'll just see how bad it can get, and also see that you can have a way out. You don't have to stay stuck. You may feel stuck now. You don't have to stay stuck. There is a way out. And we'll talk about that. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Please join me next time.